Hey everyone, Reaper here again with another video. Let's see, mistakes in comic book collecting. Well, sure, I've made a few. I'm sure we all have. Even some of the best type of collectors out there have made a few mistakes on the battlefront. I'm no exception to that, and maybe some of you are not no exception to that. All right, for me, one of the biggest mistakes I ever made when it came to comic book collecting was getting all caught up in FOMO. You know, I think a lot of us have fallen that. I think it's not, I don't want to sit here and just blame the movies, although that's a big part of it. I think personally, I don't want to just sit here and blame the movies for FOMO, because FOMO always existed, especially in comic book collecting. I think I talked in a previous video back in 1994, the second year I was collecting comic books, they were going to do that spider clone, that very popular spider clone story in Spider-Man, right? Well, that spider clone, I think it's Amazing Spider-Man 149 when they introduce him. Around that time, that book went up. I think that was maybe a $15 book at that time. And it went up to $150, $200, $225, depending on who was selling it and depending on the condition. Just like that, overnight. And people were quickly trying to get it. It was selling up. That's why the price went up. Fear of missing out. That was going to be the next big comic book. And for a while it was, and then it wasn't. So it's always existed. So and even I fell for it back then. Because remember, back in those days, for me to spend $150 on a comic book, that was crazy. That was a lot of money. If you were spending $150 on a comic book, it was supposed to be a big comic book. And for a book like the first appearance of the Spider Clone, Amazing Spider-Man 149, which was previously, like I said, a $15 book going up to $150, that's crazy. Amazing Spider-Man 129 was going for that price, a little bit more, depending on the grade. And that took 20 years for that to get to that price. And that other book I just mentioned, overnight. So yeah, FOMO was probably the biggest mistake I've made throughout the years, not just recently. More so recently than back then, because I couldn't afford to make those mistakes back then. But when I say recently, I mean years ago, not over the last few years. So just fear of missing out, hearing about a character that's going to show up in the movie, like, oh, I got to quickly get that character because X, Y, and Z. Oh, the book's going to go up and I missed out. Or, oh, the book's going to go up and I want to sell it and I missed out. Take your pick, So I would say FOMO is probably the biggest mistake I've made on the comic book battlefield when it comes to purchasing books. Secondly, I think perhaps maybe when I first started getting into the hobby again back in 2013, mainly in 2014, maybe spending a little too much on books. Now, I've said in previous videos that, I've sold stuff to get these books, and that's absolutely true. But then there were times when I wasn't selling things. I was kind of using my own personal fortune to get some books, which had its positives, because I used some of those books from back then as the foundation for selling books today to get the books that I really want, whether either brand new books to the collection or upgrades. So there's some good that came from that, but there's also some bad. And I would imagine that some people have stories where they really overspent on books. Either they were led by FOMO or whatever, overspent on books, and maybe did not have such a positive outcome for them, or more negative than positive. For me, it was kind of like a little more positive than negative, but there was negative there too. So I would say that FOMO and overspending were some of the biggest mistakes I made collecting over the years. Like I said, I don't do that anymore. I really don't. I've learned from that. Every now and then I do make a mistake, but it's very few and far between. It's a really comfortable place to be. When you get to sit back and enjoy your hobby instead of always be on the lookout, like, oh, I gotta get this, I gotta get that. And again, sometimes that really helps people for many different ways. But for me, the type of personality I am, I'm kind of laid back. It doesn't really go with my whole, personality. I guess I have more of a kind of like a surfer personality where I just go with the flow, and that interrupts my flow and causes great stress for me. Some people live that every day. And again, they live it and they do well with it, you know? But for me, it's not so good, not so good. So with that being said, I'm curious to read in the comments, what were some of your biggest mistakes in collecting? Did you collect a lot of books that you thought were going to be valuable and then turned out not to be valuable or lost their value? Did you buy a lot of variant covers? You know, I don't even know. You know, the comic book stores, they get that exclusive variant. I don't even know how the variants work. I was never a variant collector, so forgive me if I don't know what I sound like. Forgive me if I don't sound like I know what I'm talking about, because I don't know what I'm talking about when it comes to variants. You fill me in. But yeah, I know there were some people that I remember they really bought into all those variant covers, and yeah, maybe it worked out for them because they have it in their collection and that's great. Or maybe it didn't work out for them. They were buying thinking that they were going to cash out on these things, and it didn't really cash out the way they thought they were going to. I don't know. Yeah, people get offended when I mention things like that. It's not my intent. I'm trying to be positive. I know the video sounds negative, but I think it's something that most of us can all relate to, you know, to have a conversation about, you know. But those are my biggest mistakes on the battlefield. Well, what were some of yours? I'd be interested in reading about them in the comments. Again, as always, be civil, and thank you for watching. More videos to come. Take care.